Hello, YouTube. Welcome back to another book review from me, your humble host, Logan Albright. Today I'm talking about the 1955 classic #1 bestseller, as it says on the cover, Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. I've had this book in my collection for well over a decade, many, many years. It's just been sitting on my shelf. I meant to read it, never got around to it, and I finally pulled it out and decided to read it. And it's quite an interesting book. It's a post-war kind of satire of military affairs and war. And as an anti-war person myself, I found that quite amusing and funny. But it's not all funny. It's also quite tragic and shows kind of the juxtaposition of the horrors of war with the absurdity of war, and the absurdity in particular of the military apparatus. So the story takes place in a military base off the coast of Italy or in Italy, during World War II, with this company of bombers who are flying up and dropping bombs towards the end of the war. And the story follows this one character named Yossarian, and he's trying to get out of his military service. He's upset that everyone is trying to kill him, which is understandable. There's a funny line where he talks about how everyone is trying to kill me every time I go up to drop bombs on people. People try to shoot me down. It's like, well, yeah, obviously. But he's upset about that. He doesn't like being shot at, and he's trying to get out of it. But it's impossible to get out of. And the titular Catch-22 is only one of a series of kind of logical paradoxes which show up in the novel as an illustration of the absurdity and ridiculousness of military rules and regulations. So the Catch-22 of the title is that if you are insane, you are ineligible for military service and you can be dismissed and you can go home. However, if you petition the government and say that you're insane and therefore should be let off, that's evidence that you're actually sane, because only an insane person would want to fly these missions. And if you don't want to fly these missions, then you must be sane. So by trying to get out of it by reason of insanity, you prove yourself sane, and therefore you can't get out of it at all. And this is just one of a series of these kind of paradoxes which show up. There's one where he's talking about how the regulations say that you only have to fly 30 missions and then you can go home. And he said, yeah, but the regulations also say you have to follow orders, and your superior officer is ordering you to fly 40 missions instead of 30, so you have to do that. And so the regulations are in conflict with each other. And this is something that comes up again and again. And like most of the book is kind of concerned with these sorts of kind of word games, linguistic paradoxes, things that are kind of pointing out the contradictory nature of things. There's an early episode in the book where he's talking to his friend that I think is sort of illustrative of the entire story, where he's telling a story about how he used to put crab apples in his cheeks. And he says, why did you used to put crab apples in your cheeks? And they say, well, they had a nicer shape than horse chestnuts. I said, okay, but why would you want to put horse chestnuts in your cheeks? I wouldn't. I put crab apples in because they have a nicer shape. And like this logical, circular logic just goes round and round and round. You can never really figure out like why he was putting crab apples or horse chestnuts in his cheeks. That sort of thing is the example of the humor in the book and the ridiculous nature of the situation that these people find themselves in. There's another part where someone is charged with an offense, like a treason sort of thing, and that he's basically being court-martialed, and he says, I'm innocent, and they say, well, no, you must be guilty. And he said, well, how do you know I'm guilty? What evidence do you have? And they say, well, we court-martialed you. We charged you with being a traitor, so therefore you must be a traitor because we don't make mistakes. So the evidence that you're guilty is that we charged you with the crime in the first place. And that's, again, this sort of circular logic that shows up throughout the entire book. So it's quite funny in that sense, and there's not much of a plot beyond that. This is basically just a day in the life, or several days in the life of this, bomber who's trying not to get killed and who's trying not to go insane. And everyone's a little bit crazy. Everyone's a little bit loopy from this insane situation they find themselves in, this life or death situation, this huge amount of stress that they're constantly under. But there's not really much more of a narrative than that. It's just life on the base and how things are going. And then it's juxtaposed with some like moments of genuine tragedy and genuine sadness, and kind of pointing out it's all well and good to make fun of war and to make fun of the military and laugh at it, but it's actually, really horrific. And there's scenes where characters die in awful ways that are slapped right up against the comedy portion of it. And so you have this kind of emotional whiplash jarring you back and forth between laughter and sadness of how pointless and how absurd and how horrifying and how tragic the whole situation is. So I find it is interesting as an anti-war book that, came about a decade after World War II. It seems very potent. It reminded me of a lot of other books about war, movies about war that I've seen. I was thinking about Full Metal Jacket while reading it. I was thinking about Starship Troopers a little bit. And just, I think it's one of the best military books that I've read. I don't read a lot of military books. It's not really my genre. But I enjoyed this a lot because I thought it really pointed out how stupid the whole thing is. And that's always a lot of fun, to point out how stupid war is. And I kind of give Catch-22 a little bit of a lukewarm recommendation because it's not like the most emotionally powerful book I've ever read. I didn't really there aren't any characters that I found beloved. Like Yossarian is sort of a generic character. He's not really that distinguished from the other people in the unit in terms of his personality. I didn't really get emotionally invested in his story because there isn't really a story. It's like a series of jokes punctuated by tragedy. But I found the book very compelling in the sense that the social satire of it was really interesting to me, and I did laugh quite a few times during it, and I did find myself being then sobered from that laughter by some of the stuff that followed. So if you're interested in sort of social satire, anti-war literature, or military literature, I think Catch-22 is well worth reading. I put it off for a long time, but I'm glad I finally read it. I'm trying to read more real classic, books that are considered the greatest books ever written, and this makes a lot of people's lists. So I do recommend it if you're into those sort of things. So that's my review for Catch-22 by Joseph Heller, 1955. If you enjoyed that, please like the video and subscribe to the channel and click the bell for notifications. Leave me comments down below letting me know what you thought of Catch-22 if you've read it, or other books that you may have read that you want me to read or are interested in. I always love to read your comments. It's very nice. And until then, I'll be back next week with another book review for you. You'll have to wait and see what it's going to be. I hope it'll be a good one. And until then, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you later. Bye-bye.